And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Aiden Sayers. I'm the Principal Implementation Manager here at Media Valet. And today, what we're going to be going over is, really how roles move in from one group to another and how those roles are going to be effective for you in your DAM. As Ian mentioned, there will be a Q&A section at the end. However, I am usually pretty good at being able to answer some quick hit questions as they come up. So if there are some really easy things to answer, great. I'll be able to answer them during the session itself. However, don't worry if I don't get to your question during the session, we will be able to address them at the end as well. So really what we're going to be going over is what are roles when we're talking about digital asset management. We're going to talk about the media valet mindset a little bit as well. And then we'll dive into the three crucial roles themselves, which are administrators, which are, according to our poll, the bulk of what people are in today. We're also going to talk a little bit about the contributor role as well. And then lastly, we'll talk about end users and how they fit into the bigger picture too. We'll take a look at some example workflows and even some examples within Media Valet. So let's start with quickly, what are roles? So roles designate your access levels in the digital asset manager, meaning that a different role can see different content as well as perform different actions within your digital asset manager. These should be tied to what your roles are in your organization itself. Are you a marketing coordinator? Are you a social media expert? These different roles should tie into what your role is able to do in your digital asset manager. To help with this, certain roles can only access particular content, with the exception, of course, of administrators. This actually reduces a lot of noise within your DAM. People shouldn't be able to see what they don't need. And this way, you can streamline a lot of your content and a lot of tasks that you perform on a day-to-day basis. Now, Media Valet takes a very particular approach when it comes to designating roles. We create large buckets to help kind of guide you in these different roles. And we think of things like administrator is a large bucket, contributor is a pretty broad term. So you really want to kind of organize your staff into these particular buckets and then think about what is it that we want each particular group to do. From there, you generate a workflow, and oftentimes you'll work with somebody on our team to help you with that workflow. And then thinking of how your assets are living from point A to point Z, you're going to be able to create those custom roles for yourself. With that in mind, Media Valet has the ability for you to create as many roles as you want. So having custom roles per maybe even smaller teams or even individuals on some cases is going to be really important for you to actually be able to have that workflow be as smooth as possible. So with that, let's take a look at the administrators. And I like to think of this, I studied a bit of biology when I was in university. So I like to think of this as a human body. And the administrators, the bulk of those here, are really the backbone and the skeletal system of your dam. They're going to be your core structure. They are the ones that are propping everything else up. They are the ones that maintain and create a skeleton and a backbone for your dam. They're always in use. These are folks that are going to be in the dam itself on a day-to-day basis. They're always going to be using it, and they're the ones that are providing that regular support to the other systems and other roles that are being used as well, potentially on a day-to-day basis. In terms of actually looking at your teams of administrators, typically these are very few people, but they are your subject matter experts. They are focused users that are going to be in there all the time, and they are the people that other team members are going to go to for support. When we're looking at this from a practical standpoint, and you'll be able to see this in some of the examples that we'll show off later, they are going to have full access to the system, and they are going to be your core main users. Taking a look at the next role, we have your contributors. So these are like the muscular and the internal systems that aren't your skeletal system of your dam. These are going to be power users. So the examples I gave here are things like your marketing team, again, social media experts, regular uploaders like photographers. These are going to be folks that are going to be regularly in the system, maybe not quite as often as your or as your administrators, but they're going to be in there very regularly. From a content standpoint, they are going to need access to most or all of the content as they're going to be manipulating it, editing it, sending it off to other folks, but they don't necessarily need access to the backend systems like reports or user generation, things along those lines that will just kind of muddy the waters. Contributors need to be in the system regularly in order to understand what content is in that system. So, just like a good muscle system, exercise is going to be very important. So, they need to be in there regularly, making sure that they're using the system properly. They're not doing exercises that aren't really the right exercises and are maybe going to hurt them in the long term. So, they need to have good structure from those administrators in order to run that system properly. Now, lastly, we have your end users. And I like to think of these as the five senses and the brains of your dam. So these users are going to be taking in a lot of the information that's on your dam. So they're going to see, they're going to experience a lot of the content that's in your dam, and they're going to generate tasks and projects from that information. From a more practical standpoint, oftentimes this means that they're going to see a lot of the assets, maybe they're videos or photographs or any other kind of image, for example. They're going to take those and use them for their own particular projects. They'll often be able to see what's in the dam, use it for their role, and then that's pretty much it. They're going to have very limited access to the system and its contents. They really should only have access to what they're going to need for their own particular terms. You know, if you think of this from your senses, your eyes can only see what's in front of you because that's really all it needs to see. It doesn't need to see what's going on behind you. I can only touch what's in my immediate vicinity because I don't need to be able to touch something that's 50 meters away. So let's look at this from a little bit more of a practical standpoint and taking a look at this from a workflow. You have your administrators as the starting point of your asset journey. So they're going to look at your Media Valet library. They're going to take a look and create your categories. You're going to create those keywords and tags and set up the AI to make sure that everything is being tagged and searchable properly. And they'll start getting that content in the system to get users started. Oftentimes, they'll start with something like a branding guide to make sure that the contributors are using the proper branding. Again, they have that structure in place to make sure that they're using the content properly. They're also going to be the ones that are typically providing training to contributors and this is more so from a more ongoing basis. Of course, folks like Media Valet will assist you with getting your team up and running, but admins will be the ones kind of doing the train the trainer process on a more ongoing basis. They're also going to be the ones that once everything's set up, they're going to do the maintenance. So admins create the structure, they maintain that structure, and they get people started. Then that'll flow into the contributors. They're going to be uploading content. So maybe the media team or marketing folks will be uploading a ton of content, getting all of that going, making the system actually start to run. They're going to be manipulating that content. So doing things like edits and, new uploads and new versioning, and then they make it accessible by sharing it to everybody else. Finally, we apply the end users. So they're going to be able to view the content that the media team has uploaded, download the content as needed, and maybe even post some future content for future use. So to summarize here, admins create the structure, contributors build on that structure, and end users utilize that structure. So it's that. Let's take a look at a couple of examples in Media Valet itself. So what I've done is I've created a couple of roles here that we're going to be taking a look at. So to start with, I wanted to show off some of the functions that an administrator would do in order to get things started. So in order to build a proper structure, we want to start from taking a look at the groups that are going to be a part of this structure. So for example, while we already have something like contributor, maybe we want to customize a little bit what we want our contributors to be able to do. So they can go ahead and create these new groups and say, I would like my contributors to maybe even be able to upload as approved without requiring an administrator's approval. I want uh, my contributors to be able to delete assets as well. And maybe I even want them to be able to generate CDN linking. Now that I've decided on what I want my contributors to do, I'm going to call this my marketing contributors. We can add this group, and now I can start assigning more team members to these particular roles. What I can also do with this is I can actually designate particular, say, sections of my library for my individual users to use. So instead of giving my media or my marketing contributors access to everything, I can say I only want them to have access to a few upfront tools. Now let's take a look at what the actual contributors may see. So here I have the HotDAM experience up and running here, and I've allowed my contributors to be able to perform a certain number of tasks. So for example, I can allow them to view all of these different categories, which may not end up being everything, but they can take a look at things here. In addition, they also have access to their own collections, which they can create their own curated section and pull in exactly what assets that they're going to need to manipulate, to send off to other people. We've allowed them to be able to share and search for certain things. So for example, if I wanted to share this image of my dog here, I could go ahead and share that to whoever I need to. In this particular case, we're also allowing folks to be able to upload content as well. Now, in this case, uploading is not available to users in this particular view yet, but in the long term, we're going to allow for uploading to occur within the HotDAM experience as well. Then as our last role, we have our end users here. So in this particular case, our end users only have access to a very select few categories here. We've still allowed them to use collections, but maybe not quite to the level that we would see as for contributors or for administrators. And all of this is being able to be designated by those administrators and those user groups that we created before. So what we've done here is created a workflow where the administrators created a structure for both contributors and end users. Contributors have more functionality than your end users would. So they can upload, they can download, they can share, do all of these different things. And then your end users can really just download or share very quickly to a couple of other users or just download for themselves to be able to complete their final projects. Now, I do know that that was a very brief overview of some of the roles that functions or some of the functions that roles can complete. So I did want to open up the floor now to any sorts of questions or anything else that folks would like to chat about. So we can see we've got a few things coming up in the chat already. Great question here. What's a healthy maintenance practice for a DAM admin? So this does vary a little bit when it comes to different users. So depending on what you're using your DAM for, it may be relevant to go into your DAM and perform some spring cleaning, maybe once a month, archive some old material, maybe check in on your roles to make sure that they're being able to perform the right tasks. But in addition to that, administrators also have access to a reports function as well, where you can see a lot of different content that's available within your dam. So there is, you know, a lot of different information here, for example, like library and users, where you can take a look at this. And I would typically recommend doing that once a month, or sorry, once a week for checking in on your reports, once a month for doing some general spring cleaning. There's also another question here. Is there a limit to the number of contributors and admins that you can have? So it kind of does depend on your, of course, your package that you have with Media Valet. With contributors, there is no limit. Please have as many contributors as you want. The more, the merrier. Admins is maybe a little bit more limited, depending on, again, the number of users that you plan on having, the package that you have, that kind of thing. But typically, I would recommend somewhere between 5 to 10 admins, depending on, again, the size of your team. You may have even less than that. Another question here. My organization is quite large and we are attempting to organize Media Valet. We have marketing teams in different regions around the world. Are there any recommendations or resources to help us decide on our roles and who should be involved? That is a great question for that. There's a couple of different resources that I would recommend when it comes to deciding who should be doing what. To start with, I would get whoever is going to be your champion and your main leader as an administrator on Media Valet. To help with that, we actually have just launched, and you can find it on our support site, Media Valet Academy for administrators in particular. So I do highly recommend checking out that resource, as it's going to really help guide you in terms of what roles you should have, who should be involved, how to create your category structure, and really getting yourself off to a good start. So academy.mediavalet.com. We have now launched our admin course. I highly recommend taking a look at that. For administrators, you also have a point of contact at Media Valet as well. And I recommend checking in with them as well. So definitely go in and see what their ideas are. There's a ton of support articles as well. So if you're really having some difficulty deciding on who should be involved, check in with your support team as well at Media Valet and check out the Academy course. Another question, is there a way to search by image in Media Valet? Of course, absolutely. You can search for particular images just with the search functionality up at the top. You could search for, hey, I'm just looking for uh, June, in this case, the name of my dog. And there's all my pictures around June. As soon as you do a search within your Media Valet searching here, that'll take you into your advanced searching functions where if you come back with a ton of results and you need to refine it further, you can absolutely do some custom attributes. You can search by file type. You could search by prominent colors. There's lots of different things that you can search for. You can even, you know, designate, I just want to search for the file names, for example, or do I also want to search for, say, attributes, cognitive metadata, that kind of thing. Next question here. If needed, can end users or contributors be granted more power for a limited time? Yes, absolutely. So users can be changed groups as you see fit. So if a user needs maybe for a particular project or they're covering for somebody who's on vacation, they can absolutely be given, say, administrator access, or even just for them, they can be given extra access or abilities depending on what's needed. So yes, you can absolutely do that for a limited time. You can always revert them back to their uh, previous permissions as needed. So yes, short answer, you can absolutely take a dive into that a little bit further. Another great question here. Can you talk about the AI and facial recognition capabilities within with video in Media Valet? Can it do smart auto tagging of specific people or general topics? Example, soccer, swimming, construction. Sure. That I could talk about AI and facial recognition for another few hours if given the opportunity. But as a short kind of overall review of it, Media Valet does use AI tagging for both video and static imagery. For static images, so photographs, images, what have you, AI can tag general topics. So if you have a picture of somebody who's um, smiling in the picture, it'll be able to tag smile, person, maybe give a little bit of context like business or formal. It can give you that information there. You can also tag particular individuals as well. So if you tagged somebody in that picture, say that person's name was Aiden Sayers that was in that picture, you can have it set up so that future images that are uploaded that feature me in them would appear as, and I would be tagged in there and I'd be able to you could search for images of me. Video gets a little bit more complicated, where because of the moving nature of videos itself, tagging individuals for facial recognition gets a little bit tough. And unfortunately, we aren't quite there with tagging people in them yet. However, the AI can also tag things like the examples that you've given in there: soccer, swimming, construction. It can also give more general tagging as well. So it can tag things like uh, diversity and inclusion, or it can tag particular things in transcripts as well. So maybe, the idea of inclusivity comes up a bunch in that conversation. And you'll be able to even search within that video to find it uh, where it comes up uh, in that video. Just a clarification on the being able to search by an image within Media Valley, similar to something like Google Lens. Now I understand. So we aren't quite there yet of being able to search by putting up an image and saying, like, search for things that are similar to this, or search for a particular kind of doing like a reverse image search. Not quite there yet, although that's uh, a great suggestion for us to kind of put in as a feature request for future builds. And I think with that, I've addressed. Oh, there's one more here. Can you talk about versioning features in Media Valet? Yeah, absolutely. So, Media Valet allows you to basically upload different versions of a particular asset. And this is really good to make sure that you're really using a single source of truth, meaning that, you're not going to have a bunch of versions of an asset that you can search for, and you'll find, oh, which one is the current version? Which one should I be using? Media Valet does absolutely have a versioning tool. That means that, folks are, by default, going to be seeing the most up-to-date version. That being said, Media Valet also allows for the capability to be able to um, revert to previous versions if needed. So maybe the newest version wasn't approved yet, and so we need to revert to a previous version. You can absolutely do that. We have much more information, and for the sake of time, I won't go into versioning in too much detail today, but we do have a lot of information both on our support site as well as on Media Valet Academy on versioning and kind of how that works with different assets. Can users see older versions without adjusting the version for everyone? Yes, absolutely. They can. If needed, you can always take a look at previous versions. Uh, again, depending on the permissions that you allow for those users within Media Valet. Administrators can absolutely see previous versions. Uh, there's no issues with that, but you can allow contributors and end users to see older versions or not. And that's a capability that you can take a look at. So in your example here, you also use CDN linkings. You don't want to revert necessarily. However, you just want to be able to reference them. Yep, absolutely. You can do that. And that's something that you can adjust in your user permission settings. Great. Just taking a look here. Yeah, looks like we are all wrapped up here. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you're able to take some information back with you. If you have any further questions or would like to connect with me over either email or LinkedIn, my information is here. I'm just Aiden Sayers on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. And if you Again, you could also email me if you have any questions, aiden.sayers@mediavalet.com. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Ian, I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything else that you want to wrap up with.
Oh, good. Fantastic work, Aidan. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you all on the next Damn Week session.